How's it going? My name is Martin and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're just going to have a bit of an informal chat about some of the books that I've been reading lately and other ideas that I find interesting. So I got my cup of coffee here as always. And I've gathered a bunch of the books that I've been reading lately. Some of them I've finished, some of them I'm sort of at the beginning of, others I'm almost finished with. So it's a nice little mix, and this is the kind of reader that I am as well. You know, I read a bunch of books at the same time. I cannot simply stick to one book, which I know some people are like that. That's certainly not me, and sometimes I will have read half a book and then I never finish it, you know. And I don't necessarily consider it a loss either. So but these are the little books that we'll be chatting about just briefly today. The first book is one by Robert Greene, who's this American author who has written about human nature, essentially, for most of his work, at least his popular work, which is why I was interested in reading his work. I bought The Art of Seduction and Laws of Human Nature, or something like that as well, and Mastery, another book that he has written. Which I've also started, but I haven't included in the list here. That's also a very interesting book, Mastery actually, which has to do with finding your purpose in some sense in life and trying to help you guide you on the path on figuring out what it is that you're uniquely made to do. And if you can find that and you can do that in your everyday, you're going to have a much fuller life. And so that's why I thought that would be a great book to have for myself, but also for my wife and perhaps my daughter as she grows older, so she can also take advantage of that. There's a lot of interesting case studies on people that have had wildly interesting lives. For instance, it starts out with talking about Leonardo da Vinci, with him reflecting on how it came to be that his life developed or turned out the way that it did. But anyhow, The Art of Seduction is a book that I did finish, and this is a shorter version of it. The reason I got this one is because I'm interested in human nature, and that's what this is about. It is essentially talking about giving a sort of a step-to-step guide on how to seduce a person, I suppose. And then it also includes a list of different personality types or seduction types, where you can sort of fit yourself into one of these categories that aligns with the kind of person that you are, or perhaps that you would like to be. It is, of course, a bit of a manipulative book, but it speaks to the weakness of human nature, how a lot of people can very easily be seduced. And as I'm interested in writing, I'm really interested in trying to figure out how people really work, to be able to portray people as realistically as possible. And so that's one of the reasons why I was also really interested in reading this one. I enjoyed it. I'm happy that I got the concise version of it, because I'm not sure, I'm sure the bigger version is also great, but this one was perfect for me. Let's look at the second book here. It is Narcissus and Goldmund by Hermann Hesse. This is a wonderful novel. Hesse is a German author. He's one of my favorite authors, and a lot of his writing has to do with enlightenment, essentially. I think that's the theme that his books converge on in various ways. This is set in Germany during the Middle Ages, so it's also a very interesting story because it showcases life at this time. And it is a very interesting juxtaposition between mind and matter, and how both of them can essentially how both of them can get to an enlightened state in a way, or sort of our different paths to God, because obviously this is a book about a young boy that starts out in a monastery and that essentially leaves that monastery and goes out and explores the real world and sees it for the brutality that it really is, and especially at this time during the Middle Ages when there was the plague, there's a lot of poverty, there are fights, there's killing. I mean, it's a brutal place in many ways. But this guy Goldmund is this artistic soul that finds a lot of beauty in living this vagabond life, where he sort of tries to figure out who it is that he really is, and he gets some help from Narcissus. I always say Narcissus, but I'm not sure that's how you actually pronounce it. It's Narcissus. So, probably butchering that. Who is this friend that he gets at this monastery that where we begin the story, that essentially tells him that this life is not for you and you need to go out there into the world and figure it out for yourself. I had a bit of a drought in terms of finding fictional works that I really enjoyed, and this brought me back. So I highly recommend you read this one. I really enjoyed it. Let's jump on to the next one. I've been reading The Psychology of Carl Jung. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Jung's work. And this is a synthesis of his work, essentially his theory and practical application. And it's written by one of his students, Jolande Jacobi, who's this woman. And I think it's the best synthesis of his ideas that I have found. It dives into the structure of the psyche as conceived by Jung, the laws of psychic processes, forces, and then the practical applications of his theory. Really, really interesting. And there's tons of different entries into Jung's world. This is one that I haven't actually heard been talked about at all, and so that's why I would recommend this one. I actually went on ChatGPT and I tried to look at the works by some of the students by Jung. Eric Neumann, James Hillman, I think maybe Tony Wolff is another one. Edinger. There's a bunch of different ones, but I hadn't heard about Jacobi, and then I saw she had written this book, and so I had to get it. Really enjoyed it. Highly recommend it. Now let's move on to another book that I've been reading. I haven't gotten that far, but it's Elaine Pagels, or Pagels, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that. Adam, Eve, and the Serpent. Now this book has to do with how the traditions around, sexuality, marriage, all these norms that are taken for granted, that have recently come under question in the last couple of decades, but that were sort of set in stone for millennia, how they actually came about, and the development in the early days of Christianity, as these ideas were battling it out from a very different place. I mean, that was a place where these pagan morals and Jewish traditions were what permeated society, and Christianity offered a very different way of looking at things. Infidelity is one thing, for instance, in marriage. When you read the Gospels and you read the New Testament, their view of what marriage is, and sex for that matter, is entirely different from what the culture at the time had to think about these different things. I mean, it was common to stray from your marriage, almost expected, and it was easy to get divorces, infanticide was relatively normal. And so it brought in a host of ideas that were completely novel, and how ideas within Christianity also sort of battled it out and came on top, and the controversies and the heresies that were sort of confluating and occurring at the time. So it's a very interesting book, very interesting author. I first read a book by Pagels, which was the Gnostic Gospels, which were these heretic texts that were sort of shunned or put outside of the canon. And there's a number of Gospels that were not included, that are considered heretical, that we call the Gnostic Gospels, or would sort of be within that would be within that tradition, but that were considered heretical by the early church fathers and influential Christians at the beginning of this vast and immensely rich tradition that now underlies our Western society. So really interesting author, really interesting scholar. I recommend that you check out her work. I haven't gotten that far in this book. I think I've read the first chapter or so, which sort of looks at how completely different the values that Christ took into a society that was essentially pagan for the most part. And then you also have the Jewish community, they also had a lot of different values and ideas to the way the Semitic tradition were doing things as well, and especially the pagans, the Romans, etc. And then Paul's letters, and how he has these ascetic ideals, and how you should essentially abstain from sex altogether to be as pure as you can be, in his early letters, etc. So really interesting book. Definitely check this one out if that topic compels you, as it does me. I'm really interested in getting a better understanding of Christianity, because it is such an important cornerstone and foundation of the Western world that we live in today, even though there is a lot of, certainly in the Nordic countries, we are traditionally now considered, I think, secular, and I think the belief in God is declining, although don't quote me on that. And so we have, in a sense, sort of lost touch with that tradition, which is still very much influencing our lives. And so that's why I think it's important to actually gain an understanding of this and rebind this connection, which is essentially what religion etymologically means as well. So religio, which means to rebind, to sort of reconnect, interestingly. Then another short mention of the idea of the holy by Rudolf Otto, who is this German theologian that coined the term numinous, which is one way of explaining the religious experience, which is sort of awe-inspiring and at the same time completely terrifying, and it's difficult to encapsulate, but numinous might be one of the best ways of explaining that, and that's essentially one of the things that he lays out in this book, the idea of the holy. I haven't read anything else by Rudolf Otto, but he seems like a really interesting thinker, and I'm excited to get further into this book. I've only read about 2 chapters where he talks about the rational and the non-rational, and this coining of the term numen, or the numinous, which you may have heard about. The last book that I just started is The Origins of Totalitarianism by Hannah Arendt. Arendt, not entirely sure how to pronounce this one either, who is this German scholar, very influential. She has written about totalitarianism, about violence, tons of different things. I am absolutely encapsulated by this book. It's so interesting, and I've just gotten started, where she's sort of laying out some of the reasons why she thinks that the Jews became the target of the Nazi ideology, and she also touches on the Soviet Union, and that's essentially what this book is about. It's a study of how these totalitarian systems came to be in Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, and it's definitely a book that is very relevant to this day, and I'm very excited to keep on reading this one. I don't have too much to say as of yet because I haven't read that much about it, but it's really interesting just to read about some of the history behind this anti-Semitism, and she seems to have a really nuanced view on these things as well, from what I can tell. And so she's definitely a very, very important author, and yeah, you should definitely read her works, I think. I'm just getting started. I was looking at this lecture given by Ian McGilchrist, I think his name is, that talked about the importance of truth, and sort of in the context of our modern world, and he touched base on Arendt's work in a ton of different ways, and so I was happy to see that because I had just gotten the book. Obviously, this is a very classical book. I think it's the first book that she also wrote, which is just insane. But yeah, a really interesting book. And I would also love to hear if any of these specific books that I talked about very briefly in this video would be something that you would like me to make a longer form video on, because I would be happy to do that. And so these are the different books. I'm sure you can trace back the video and take a look at them once more, and do let me know, because I would love to get some direct feedback on it and then give you some of what you would find really interesting. But this was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I guess I'll see you next time.